The mass production of plastics began in the 1950s and has skyrocketed in use over time. The Environmental Protection Agency says that in 2015, landfills in the U.S. received 26 million tons of plastic, and out of that, only about 10% of it is recycled. This widespread use of plastic is a global epidemic, and it's quickly killing our ecosystems.
Plastic is everywhere. It's getting into our oceans at an unprecedented rate. Up to a rubbish truck a minute of plastic is going into our oceans, and we're producing hundreds of millions of tons of the stuff every single year.
That's Will McCallum, head of oceans at Greenpeace UK and author of How to Give Up Plastic, a guide to changing the world one plastic bottle at a time.
Why does it matter there's so much plastic in the ocean? Well, you have the obvious problems like turtles, whales getting tangled up in it, or seabirds maybe choking on it. But you also have problems with the unseen plastic, the invisible plastic, what's called microplastics, that when it's in the ocean, it can be eaten by a small fish, which is eaten by a bigger fish, eaten by an even bigger fish, and maybe even end up on your dinner plate. And the problem with plastic in the ocean is when it's there, it stays there. It's very hard. It doesn't really break down, and it's hard to clean up because the oceans are so big and the currents take it all over the place. And when it's in the ocean, it also acts as a kind of magnet. It attracts other kinds of toxins, and so when it gets eaten, it's much more toxic than just the plastic. It could have all kinds of things like mercury or other chemicals attached to it.
Once we toss that makeup wipe, plastic bag, or water bottle in the trash bin, it can take more than 400 years to degrade. With so little plastic being recycled, much of it is left in landfills, ultimately feeding into our land and oceans.
So plastic in the ocean is this growing problem, and unfortunately plastic production is set to quadruple by 2050, which just cannot happen if we want to stop our oceans being a dumping ground.
These days, we're so used to stopping at a shop to grab an iced coffee or a packaged snack box to eat on the go. Using plastic is quick, easy, and convenient, and it's everywhere. From the food we eat to the skincare products in the beauty aisle.
Wet wipes is one of those ones that a lot of people don't realize they're made of synthetic materials. They're made of plastic fibers, these wet wipes. So when you're taking your makeup off, or when you're out and about with your child and you need a wet wipe, thinking about the fact that this thing in your hand could end up in the environment for hundreds of years, and you've literally used it for about 3 seconds. And the problem with plastic is quite a simple design problem, that at the time where we started mass producing it, they didn't really think about the fact that we should be designing things in a much more circular way, in a way that means that we're not just putting loads of energy into producing something, using it for a short amount of time, and then letting it back into the environment. It's a bad use of resource. It doesn't make economic sense, and yet we just slipped into that habit.
So what can consumers do to break these bad habits and reduce plastic use? McCallum says start with small lifestyle changes.
So in my book, I go through the house room by room because I think it's a great way to break it down, to make it a more manageable mission to give up plastic. Because if you can see that you could take this month by month, a different room. So the bathroom is a place where lots of people see a lot of plastic. So simple things like a bar of soap instead of shower gel, that could be one way. Or moisturizer or makeup in tins. Somewhere like Lush sells it in tins, and then they'll take your tins back at the end and wash them and reuse them. Instead of cotton earbuds that use plastic, using ones that use bamboo, or just not using them at all. A lot of doctors say you shouldn't really be using them. Again, instead of having synthetic material towels or wipes, cutting them out and using reusable cloth or more natural materials.
And when it comes to choosing an alternative to plastic packaging, aluminum or glass are both better options.
Glass is a lot more recyclable, aluminium is a lot more recyclable, but really the main thing we have to be looking for whenever you're in the store and you're looking for an alternative is there a way of cutting out the packaging altogether? Because any single-use packaging is a fairly inefficient use of resource. It's a fairly inefficient way to do things. So yes, aluminium and glass are a lot more what we call closed loop, so they have a much higher value on the materials, so they're recaptured more often.
When looking at personal consumption of plastic in your house, McCallum suggests going room by room and looking at every item. Ask yourself if you really need that product and if there's a better way to purchase the same ingredient without plastic packaging. Looking inside the kitchen pantry and in your fridge, the biggest culprit is often single-use food packaging.
There's so much packaging that could be reduced. So things like plastic water bottles, partly we shouldn't be really having a plastic water bottle industry. And anywhere where there's safe drinking water from the faucet, you shouldn't be using plastic bottles. Cutting out plastic packaging for fruit and vegetables, so much of that is just a force of habit. You could just cut it out completely. There are so many areas of a grocery store, and you look around and you can see plastic doesn't need to be there. We don't need any alternative material. We just need no packaging at all. So doing that research, where is there in my area, or maybe it's online even, that isn't using packaging, and opting for that. And, if you want to take it a step further, letting your old store where you used to shop know that that's why you've left them, because then that might actually spark them to have a bit of a change.
And McCallum says during the work week, planning ahead and packing reusable bottles or food tins for lunches can add up to save a lot of plastic.
When I was researching this book and I wanted to try and put into practice all of these things, was making my lunches for the whole week ahead on a Sunday. So very simple. Saves you money. Take it in a lunchbox. It means you have a nicer experience of sitting down and eating your lunch instead of just grabbing it and eating it on the go. And by being that bit more organized, researching where are we doing our shopping, where are there places without plastic, then we can start really reducing our plastic footprint. And it sends a signal to these companies as well. Hopefully it creates that competition, that race to the top, where they're trying to compete for custom on the basis of, are they doing enough about the plastic problem?
And much of the problem starts with how companies design and manufacture these products.
So much of food packaging, we don't really need it. It's just people wanted to put their logo on it or have a fancy packaging design so that people notice their product. But that's quite simple stuff to change. Companies could decide we're only going to make our packaging out of 2 kinds of materials, and we're only going to have a set number of designs of those bits of packaging, and that would have a massive impact on plastic pollution. So by charging producers and making sure they are taking responsibility financially for the end of their product's life, we'll see them moving away from using single-use plastic.
Companies need incentives to change their business practices, and that's why global government regulation and cooperation is vital to solving this issue.
The most important would be a simple target. Say, we are going to reduce plastic by 50% by 2025. And, when you set targets like that, it sends that signal to the market that this is what government is serious about. And then they start to innovate. At the moment, where's the incentive for them to innovate? So that, I'd say, is the incentive, setting that target. But then I also think looking at things like levies or potential taxes on virgin plastic production. So saying we have to stop producing so much of this. We cannot continue producing this raw material in the quantities, because once it's produced, we're going to find a use for it. And that use is going to be temporary, and then it's going to end up back in the environment again with no plan for it.
Reducing our dependence on plastic starts with each consumer and the choices we make on a daily basis.
One of the most important tips is to start talking about this problem, to start calling it out when you see it in public, to speak to business owners, to call on your local representatives and say, you have to make this easy for us. Companies and government have a responsibility to set those targets to there's less plastic out there so that we're not all sharing in this problem that we're feeling powerless to stop. So sharing that responsibility around, and people can do it in all kinds of ways. They can use social media, they can write letters, they can pick up the phone to a customer services manager, or they can talk to their friends, their neighbors, their colleagues about why it is that they care about plastic and hope that people follow their example.
To find out more about this topic and our guest, Will McCallum, visit greenpeace.org.uk or viewpointsradio.org. This segment is written and produced by Amira Zaveri. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
It's back to school season, and classrooms often don't come with everything teachers need. The average public school teacher spends $500 each year out of their own pocket for learning materials. One nonprofit is working to change that. DonorsChooseorg founder Charles Best.
My students and I started DonorsChoose.org because we thought people would want to help teachers if they only knew what we needed and could see how their donation would be used.
DonorsChoose.org enables teachers to request classroom resources ranging from books to pencils to field trips. Donors can browse through projects and give to the ones that inspire them. Supplies are shipped directly to the school, and donors receive thank yous from the classroom. Amanda Lennox Hall teaches 3rd grade in Austin, Texas.
DonorsChooseorg has had a tremendous impact on my classroom. We've diversified our library, started a cooking club, and even learned to become beekeepers. We're humbled by all the generous support, often from complete strangers.
You can support a public school teacher today by visiting DonorsChooseorg.
Paid non-attorney spokesperson paid for by the Sentinel Group. Attention military vets and current soldiers who served between 2002 to 2016. Have you or a loved one suffered hearing loss or tinnitus after serving or while serving in the U.S. Armed Forces? You may be entitled to compensation. 3M, the manufacturer of earplugs made for combat, recently paid the government $9.1 million to settle a False Claims Act case for knowingly selling these defective earplugs for over a decade. Specifically, the United States argued that the manufacturer knew their earplugs were too short for proper insertion into users' ears, and that the earplugs could loosen and therefore didn't perform properly or reduce noise the way they should have. If you or a loved one suffered hearing loss or tinnitus after serving or while serving in the U.S. Armed Forces, you need to choose the right legal team that has the experience, support staff, and resources to seek the most compensation for your injuries. Call the Sentinel Group now for more information and a free case review. Call 800-655-6458. 800-655-6458. That's 800-655-6458.
Thank you for listening to Viewpoints Radio, a production of Media Tracks Communications. If you enjoyed this broadcast, please support our show by subscribing, sharing it with a friend, and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can find more Viewpoints stories on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and viewpointsonline.net. Also, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Viewpoints Radio.
Coming up on Viewpoints.
I don't think sex really matters. If you're interested in the field, I always say, try and get one of those ancillary jobs. Become a CNA, become a phlebotomist.
Male nurses aren't just employed to fill a quota. Their role is vital to overall patient care. Then,
I would hope he would still be alive,
What happens when the bully you wished would go away actually did? I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.